So for 15 years, Lindsey has led innovation programs for Future 500 companies, leveraging her background both in industrial design and in design strategy to help her clients envision and create transformative experiences with a focus on accelerating sustainability and climate justice. She's the founder of Eco.Your.org, a website that helps professionals drive sustainability in their workplace. And she's a leader in the Climate Designers, a group that's actually co-hosting with us today. The leaders are not here, but they helped promote this, and they're really excited about Lindsey speaking about this as well. We definitely, it's a pressing time to talk about this issue. And we're really grateful that Lindsey's the one to do it because she's very knowledgeable. So Lindsey, I'll kick it over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Kate. Let me get my screen share going and I will jump right in. All right, so today I'm really excited to talk with all of you about how design can save the world, specifically with a focus on climate action. So as Kate just gave a little bit of my background, I work right now with the creative agency Indigo Slate as a creative strategist. I've been working in the design field for close to 2 decades at this point, volunteer with climate designers, and I personally have a career mission focusing on sustainable innovation, which I'm really excited to be doing with my human experience innovation team at Indigo Slate. So this presentation is very much inspired by the work that we are doing to figure out how we can drive sustainability in innovation projects that we work on, whether or not our clients are asking for that. It's just so important, and there are so many business opportunities that we're working to drive sustainability into all of the work that we are doing. So I will jump in by talking about why it's important for designers to focus on the climate crisis and what I mean when I say climate crisis, because I realize not everybody is following global climate policy like it's their favorite sports team, which seems to be my world these days. So first of all, when I talk about the climate crisis, that's kind of shorthand for actually a lot of ecosystems that are really important for us to just have a safe, healthy planet to live on. There are a lot of relationships between these. They're all interdependent. And there's a whole framework where scientists are contributing to this research and assessing what's a safe level for these boundaries and what we need to do to stay within them. You can see that a couple of these planetary boundaries are already in the danger zone, and a couple more are in jeopardy. And these two on the right are actually just not quantified yet what the safe levels are. So there's some very problematic things happening to our world, and we want to keep it safe and healthy for people, because if we throw these ecosystems off balances, the consequences are really intense. If we took all of these consequences, we could create a really depressing bingo card of things that have already happened in 2021 and get like a bingo very fast. We've been seeing droughts. We've had heat waves in Seattle, like completely shattering previous temperature records. We've seen intense storms with the terrible flooding that we've seen around Europe, sea level rise, there are wildfires like all over the world right now. I'm going to stop because I know it's very doom and gloom. They're really intense problems. It threatens our food systems, it threatens our health, and it threatens our global security. Another really important point about all of these impacts is that the worst of these consequences are probably not happening to those of us who are working in the design space. It's happening to the poorest populations in the world, the most marginalized populations in the world. So you may have heard the term climate justice, and this is the reason that I care so much about climate, because every social justice issue that matters to people is all wrapped up in this climate justice story. Racial justice is very closely intertwined with climate justice. Feminism is really closely entwined, especially in the global South. A lot of women and children suffer some of the worst consequences of climate action. So taking action on climate is a way to help empower women and children around the world. It's a way to help fight for anti-racism. And it's like caring about kids or global hunger or global health. All of these issues that are all really important to me are all wrapped up in this. So that's where my passion around this topic comes from. And it's also an incredibly urgent issue. Scientists' consensus is that 1.5 degrees is probably about the maximum safe amount of warming that we can handle, and we're already at 1.2. And that means that in order to really avoid the very worst irreversible damage, we need to see a 50% reduction in our emissions by 2030, by the end of this decade. So all these issues that we care deeply about because of their impacts to people and this urgency are the reasons I think it's so important for everyone to really step up and take action and be proactive about climate. The good news in all of this is that really all the solutions that we need to address climate are technologies and solutions that we already have. It's really just a matter of the collective will to change systems and make this happen. We need a clean power grid so that our energy is coming from clean renewable sources. We need to electrify everything that's running on fossil fuels. So this means vehicles, other forms of transportation, industrial processes, and the way that we heat our buildings. We need to restore ecosystems, which includes not destroying them anymore. We need to create healthier food systems that don't pollute and that create healthier food for people. We need to address the waste issues that deplete resources and pollute the environment. And all these solutions need to be really thoughtfully deployed with a really strong lens on climate justice. If we're not carefully focused on climate justice as we deploy solutions, there's a really high chance that we'll continue some of the harms and damages to those vulnerable populations. So just transition is another term that you may have heard that's all about really focusing on the most vulnerable people and putting their needs front and center in the way that we plan for a transition to a cleaner economy. So that is the climate crisis in a nutshell. So where does design fit in? Today, I want to make the case that we can use design thinking to magnify the impact that people can have in the world, to help shift entire systems and to fix a lot of experiences that are broken today. So I'm going to come back to this at the end and kind of lead up to what those solutions look like by talking about three other things first. So first, we'll look at what's broken in the experience that we have or that we're offered today of how to be sustainable. What does it look like if it's done right? And then imagining how that could look if deployed at scale in the future, and then talking about how we can help bring about that future as designers. So first, let's jump into what's broken with today's experience of being sustainable. Like, is it fine? I want to personally talk about my own experience of just trying to take some personal responsibility and deciding to go plastic free. So I created a little mini journey map and I kind of evaluated, was it easy, enjoyable, affordable, or impactful to try to go plastic free? So there's a whole thing called Plastic Free July. And I was like, okay, lots of people do this. I'm going to get on board. I know that there are a bunch of really good reasons to ditch plastics. It's made from fossil fuels. So you're supporting the oil industry. The production of plastic causes pollution. The waste from plastic is polluting oceans and the land. And just about all plastic never gets recycled. There's maybe a 10% recycling rate. So it's going to be a little tough, but it's totally worth it. Let's ditch plastics. So before I start, I'm a design researcher. So of course I'm going to see what are other people doing? How are people solving this right now? So I spent a bunch of time scouring the internet, trying to figure out okay, how are people doing the plastic free things? And one of the first things I discovered is that apparently meat has to come in plastic. So you might be able to get someone to hand it to you without the plastic, but it just means they're throwing it away instead of you throwing it away. So unless maybe you buy a live animal, I don't think there's any way to get meat without plastic. And I couldn't find any place in Seattle that you can get plastic free cheese. So apparently we have to change our diet as well to go plastic free. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'll put a pin in that. Let's just look at my grocery list of what are the things we normally buy, which things are coming in plastic and which things are fine to keep buying. And I looked at the stuff my family buys from Costco, and there were only 4 things on a list of 40 that didn't have some amount of plastic in their packaging. I was like, oh my God, we're gonna have to make everything from scratch out of bulk bins. How do you even do this? It's just gonna be grains and vegetables forever. So when it came to the time to ditch the plastic, I was like, you know what? That's not going to happen. This is too much. It's too hard. So I decided to just figure out what small changes to reduce plastic could we still do. So going to the farmer's market is super great, but they're only open for these 4 hours this one time on the weekend. So there's a big timing constraint there. And I tried bringing my reusable container to the grocery store with the tear scale so they can weigh your container and then weigh what you put in it. And I was like, I can't figure out how to make the scale work. So I kind of gave up, but they had paper bags. So it was okay. It wasn't plastic. I had these really cute reusable bags instead of Ziplocs, but I'm like, oh, now you got hand wash a whole bunch of reusable bags. So that's more work. And I was like, I'm going to find a good natural deodorant because they have the plastic free containers. But then they told you that you have to not stain your clothes, try to wash them immediately after wearing them. I'm like, so now I have to do laundry every single day, because I'm going plastic free. It just keeps piling on more and more chores. And I read about someone you don't need to use trash can liners, just wash out your trash can yourself. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. And basically just ignoring all the other single-use plastics that are too much trouble to do without. So as I reflect on that experience, there was nothing easy about trying to go plastic free. I had to do research. My options were limited. I had to like run extra errands, like had constraints on timing. I had to give up food groups, spend more time cleaning things, and needed to do more food prep. And nothing is like adding like more enjoyment to my life. It was just more stress or guilt or frustration. And a lot of the solutions cost more either upfront or just cost more on an ongoing basis to like buy reusable containers or buy things plastic free from the farmer's market. And in the end, like the amount of impact this has like isn't really significant at all. So maybe plastic free is just like the worst example I could pick, but I think that there are plenty more examples of very poorly designed experiences of sustainability. And that's because they're not really designed at all. Like if you just look at what we do with our waste, it's like way easier to just drop anything in a trash can than all the rules we're supposed to follow for recycling things. And like many people recycle anyway, and that's wonderful because we care, but also we do like a crappy job and like ignore half the rules because they're a pain. When we look at ownership, like a lot of the messaging you'll get of like how to be eco-friendly is like repair your clothes instead of just tossing them, or like take your things when they're broken to a repair shop. But like all of that takes like a lot of time, effort, skills, or money. Whereas like often for less money, you can just buy a brand new replacement, and it's more fun to shop than like run an errand to get the same old thing repaired and it's almost as good as it started. So the incentives to do the right thing are just all backwards right now. And then a third example is just looking at our transportation system. The most climate friendly option is definitely to ride transit or walk or take a bike. But those all have really big drawbacks. It takes longer. Like our cities and towns really aren't designed with the infrastructure to support biking and walking. And everywhere you go, oh, I just heard a little noise. You have to be around all the noise and pollution next to the roads, and you have more safety risk when you're biking and walking. Whereas if you drive, you can just like hop in your car, call an Uber, and just park anywhere. It's super easy. So these are the kinds of experiences of how we're communicating to people about how to be sustainable that are really lousy experiences. It's saying like, give up convenience, give up the things that you like, go without stuff, pay extra, do more work or make do with less stuff, be really self-disciplined, sacrifice your time, settle for options that you don't like, get buried in the research, figuring it all out, or make things yourself or figure out a workaround. So my argument is that the way we're asking people to help save the planet completely sucks. And there are some amazing people out there who are doing it anyway. Like they're incredible. I'm so proud that they're like eco influencers and leaders who are making all these sacrifices because they care a lot. But the big problem is this isn't going to be a solution that can scale. This terrible experience is going to keep most people from doing it. And we need to transform the entire population to being sustainable if we're going to address the problem. So right now, we're asking people to opt out of the systems because they're harmful, but we're not offering them a viable alternative for a new system that you can opt into. So this is where I think designers can come in. We need to design the new systems that will make it simple, easy, and delightful to protect our planet. And the great news is that each one of those experiences that is broken today is an opportunity for someone to innovate. Because people really do want to see the world be a safe and healthy place. They just need our help to make it easier. So let's move into chapter 2 and look at some examples of what it can be like when it's done right. So I'll share a few kind of companies and concepts that are doing cool things in climate positive ways. So one small example is Blue Land, where they just make refillable home cleaning products. So you've got beautifully designed reusable bottles and these little dissolvable tablets that drop right in, and the package is compostable, so there's zero waste. It makes it very affordable. You can spend less on these tablets than buying an entire new bottle of cleaner. It saves a lot of energy with shipping because it's just this tiny compact thing and not shipping around the water. And overall, they've been incredibly impactful, eliminating over 1 billion single-use plastic bottles from landfills and oceans since 2019. My next example is Ridwell, which is a fun local company in Seattle that basically takes care of all those like tricky to recycle things that you just have around your house, like batteries and light bulbs and plastic film that you can't recycle curbside and your old clothes. And they even do rotating categories so you can get rid of your like small electronics and cords and stuff like that. And they make it super easy. They have fun little bags that you collect stuff in around your house and you just pop it into a bin and someone comes and takes it away from your front porch. So this is a great example of taking like a very burdensome system and just flipping it around to something that makes it very easy and lightweight to be climate positive. They've kept 2 Boeing 737s worth of plastic film at a landfill so far. I'm sure everyone is also familiar with Tesla. What I love about what Tesla has done is they've completely transformed the image of EVs from kind of like dinky, low powered, like funny little cars to like awesome driving experience, like super sexy, tons of innovation, and like everyone wants to own a Tesla now. In addition to just creating a really enticing experience that's also eco-friendly, they've created a full service ecosystem there where you can have Tesla solar panels on your roof and the power wall that protects you against power outages. So you can opt into a completely different infrastructure of clean energy, as well as having the electric vehicle. And they've had a huge impact in terms of metric tons of CO2 that they've kept out of the atmosphere and putting loads of gigawatts of clean solar energy into the grid. Another great example is Hyperloop, which I'm as excited to learn this week is part of the infrastructure package that was just passed by Senate this week. It creates a great traveling experience that can be faster than airplanes for certain distances, and it can be completely clean travel because they can have solar panels over the tubes, so it can be self-powered and even put clean energy back onto the grid. And this can offer us a clean and faster option for shipping as an alternative to aircraft and other carbon-intensive transportation systems. So no compromise to experience, and you can completely shift an infrastructure to a clean and exciting solution. And then our last example is looking at the city of Singapore, which has done really amazing things in turning their city into like a green, like eco paradise. They've got amazing walkability throughout the city. It's full of these like green living buildings that have tons of plants growing up the walls, which has very practical purposes. It helps absorb heat for this tropical place, and it makes them more resilient against storms and floods and other issues like that. And they've done all of this with a really strong focus on equity. So they've actually increased home ownership rates as they've transformed their city. And it's just beautiful architecture and an amazing place to be. So they're proving to the world that green cities can be achieved. It doesn't even take that much time. They can be equitable and just enhance well-being for everybody. So I love looking at examples like these because they get me all inspired. And if we go back to this framework that I looked at for my plastic-free experience, they deliver on being easy to use, enjoyable, they enhance your experience instead of taking away from it. Most of them are affordable, and I hope that as these scale that we'll see more affordability for these types of solutions as well. And they just really magnify the amount of impact that people can make apart from when they just try to do it on their own. So I think three key things that make those solutions really successful is they give you lots of reasons to want to try them. It's not just the same product, but made sustainable, but there's all kinds of innovation and exciting new things to try, stuff you want to talk about or tell your friends about that's built into that experience. They also really think in terms of systems. So it's not just about innovating your own little product, but thinking about the whole ecosystem of like service and like what kind of additional materials or means that you need to enable that system. So what does the website look like? What does your customer service experience look like? What other resources do you need? All of that is considered as part of the ecosystem. And finally, sustainability is very much built in to those solutions. It's not just sort of like an afterthought layer that you add on top, but it's just part of the core architecture of the solution. So what's working great in all of these case studies is that we're starting to build some alternate systems that people can opt into, which fixes some of those broken experiences that have really sucked in the past for how we've been telling people to be sustainable. And that means more people will be more likely to join in, and we make it so that they can have a bigger impact. So let's imagine if some of those kinds of ideas could be used to solve some of the problems that I pointed out in my first chapter. So I like to imagine a world where all designers designed with equal emphasis on human experience and sustainability, what kind of positive impact they can have, as well as making sure that they're viable business models and technically feasible. So if we go back to my example of going plastic free, like, what if I'd started Plastic Free July and there was just like this great store that was right there in my neighborhood that just like had everything plastic free and like as many options as you get from like going to Target. And maybe in addition to just being plastic free, it's like really nice, like cool reusable packaging or beautiful recyclable or compostable packaging and convenience food. So I can like still give my kids string cheese, but it's just in a nice compostable wrapper instead of me having to like buy a bulk block of cheese that's not in plastic and cut it up for my children. So the convenience is still there. Like the store could just take all the work out of it. When I think about the impact that that could have in terms of systems, there would be a whole supply chain backing that up, which would be putting pressure on suppliers to offer plastic-free options. And maybe there's a whole clean energy distribution system. So the ripple effects of having this kind of service start to really spread and make a bigger impact. Maybe we could even see a decline in the fossil fuel plastics industry, as for things we still really need plastic material characteristics for, are replaced by plant-based alternatives that can biodegrade or compost or dissolve into fish food when released into the environment, instead of damaging the world the way that plastics does. I love this idea because we start to put a dent in all the plastic pollution that's going into oceans right now, which is 1 garbage truck of plastics per minute. So if this talk is 40 minutes, we're putting 40 garbage trucks worth of plastic into the ocean, just as we're all sitting here listening to this. And another huge impact that we can make an improvement in is there are a ton of negative health effects of plastics. Like if you heat food in plastic, it leaches really dangerous chemicals into your food and can cause health impacts pretty much like at every stage of the plastic life cycle. So it's a good one to go ahead and ditch. Let's also look at the waste ecosystem. If we just didn't have landfills anymore, like what would that ecosystem look like? We could still have our recycling and we could have our compost, but I imagine our landfills or trash cans being replaced by a box for reusables that just get returned to a whole reusables infrastructure all the time. I think there could be like a really cool reward system that like gets people discounts and coupons and things for opting into this system. Is a good way to make it enticing to get people to adopt to a change. And what if it were so ubiquitous to have reusables as just like part of the everyday infrastructure that like every time an Amazon delivery or a UPS driver showed up, they would just like take away your box of reusables. So it's just this like ongoing cycle that you don't have to worry about reusables piling up in your home. Also, if we can get more municipalities to offer curbside picking for compost, this makes such a huge difference. Compost right now can basically replace artificial fertilizers and make food systems healthier. And when we put food waste into landfills, it releases one of the most potent greenhouse gases, methane. So we can get rid of methane coming out of landfills. We could make agriculture more sustainable. And maybe we could do some like really lovely things with the land that we have landfills in now, instead of just like throwing garbage on the ground. And again, keeping some more plastics out of the ocean. So I love to think about how we could transform the waste system. And so what we can design that helps build up that ecosystem. And then finally, I also love to imagine what it could look like if we were able to transform the transportation system so that eco-friendly forms of getting around your city or town became the predominant models. So what if it were easier to walk, bike, or take public transit than to drive? So there's a great concept called 15-minute cities, where city planning sets it up so that each neighborhood has like all the resources that a person would need right there within a 15-minute walk. So even your workplace might be within 15 minutes, but your grocery store, your library, your gym, all the community spaces that you want to have become very walkable. A really cool idea that I stole from Singapore's vision for the future is putting more of the like big arterial roads underground. So what if we could really reclaim like major amounts of roadway and turn it into these beautiful green spaces? So like walking through a city felt like you were just walking through a park the whole time. I get so excited at the idea of being able to walk around a city like that. And there'd be like the bike paths, there'd be great public transportation underground as well, but it could just completely transform the landscape of what it feels like to be in a city. The great part of that is not only would it be delightful to be in that city, but also having all of those plants helps absorb heat, which protects our cities from the heat waves that are going to be more common because of climate change. And having more plants and permeable ground cover also can absorb more water, so we get more intense storms or risk of flooding. This actually mitigates the amount of flooding that we see, so it can make our cities safer both against heat and from rain. I like to imagine just transforming what's the norm for how we get around. So the default is assuming people will be taking a bike or walking or taking public transit, and that the solutions that we design around that start to center green forms of transportation instead of always assuming like, oh, your groceries will go into the trunk of your car. In terms of impact, I also love to imagine cities free of pollution from cars. Like, just imagine being able to walk around without the noise and the exhaust and like the very real health damages that come from pollution from cars. A study that came out at the beginning of this year identified that 20% of premature deaths are caused by fossil fuel pollution, and a large part of that is the exhaust that's coming from vehicles. So maybe we don't have to walk around breathing poisonous air all the time, and we get fresh air surrounded by plants instead. And another major impact that we could have is improving the chances of people being able to raise out of poverty. One of the biggest barriers for economic mobility right now is access to transportation. So if we build up these transportation systems in a really equitable way with a focus on social justice, we can also help address a big social issue in addition. So those are just a few ideas I have about what kind of different future we could create by focusing on sustainability that could be a great experience, as well as make a big difference for what it's like to live on our planet. So we looked earlier about the sustainability experience that we're offered today, a whole lot of like really lousy experiences that few people are willing to opt into. I think that we can transform that to solutions that make life more convenient. You get to enjoy the things that you like, where there's plenty for everyone. Things are affordable for everyone. You can do less work instead of more, have just the right amount of the things that you need. You still get to be indulgent. None of this like short showers or don't flush the toilet. You get to save time instead of spending more time on it. You can enjoy plenty of options instead of having a limited selection. It's easy to find things that are eco-friendly instead of having to do a ton of research. You can have things made for you that help solve problems instead of being told to make things yourself. And everywhere you look, you can find really great solutions. So this is a sustainability experience that I hope we can help move the world toward. So let's finally talk about what we can do as designers. At the beginning, I talked about how design thinking can help us magnify impact, shift systems, and fix broken experiences. So for each one of these categories, I'm going to offer up a couple of ideation frameworks as potential tools that we can use as designers to help solve some of these big problems and think of really compelling solutions. So first, we'll look at a couple solutions focused on impact. So this is basically looking back at those planetary boundaries. How can we impact the climate directly, ecosystems directly, education systems, like any kind of system that shapes what kind of world we live in. So the first framework is really just thinking about turning negatives into positives. So there are a lot of ways that products as they're produced today tend to typically have pretty negative impacts. And a really common approach that we see from businesses is to say, we're going to reduce our emissions by 50%, which is basically just moving this like to here. I'm like, I hate to break it to you, but that's still bad. Like, I don't know if you deserve a pat on the back for that. Like, you're still harming the environment. So instead, I encourage you to have the ideation prompt of how might we become climate positive? So instead of aiming for less bad, how can we create solutions that instead of polluting, help the oceans become cleaner? Instead of deforesting, restore ecosystems. Instead of propagating social injustice, help drive social equity. Instead of producing harmful waste, maybe our processes can produce beneficial byproducts. Instead of releasing a lot of greenhouse gas emissions, we can help draw emissions out of the atmosphere. Instead of biodiversity loss, we can help protect biodiversity. Instead of unethical labor practices, we can help enrich employees. And instead of things that damage our health, we can do things that actively improve health. So a couple of really fun examples. The air company does this amazing thing where they pull carbon out of the atmosphere using an artificial photosynthesis process, and they turn it into vodka and hand sanitizer. So you can buy vodka that's literally carbon that's been taken out of the air. Another amazing company is based in Australia called Outland Denim, and their labor force is composed of women who have been rescued or escaped from sex trafficking. And there was a really powerful story of a woman, because she was able to earn wages at this company, was able to buy her sister's freedom out of the sex trafficking trade. And they have a really robust education program. So they help make sure that all of their employees build up a really complete skill set. So even when they move on from that company, that they have a really strong prospects for employment. So the chance of them falling victim to the sex trafficking trade in the future is much lower. So I think that's a really incredible example of how a business can enrich employees. And these are the kind of results you get by aiming for a positive impact, not just fewer human rights violations or less emissions. The second framework that I want to offer up is to align impact with purpose. So this can be a great brainstorming tool, and you might generate tons of ideas, but then you really need a good way to narrow down those ideas. We have only so much time and bandwidth and budget and all of those things to drive solutions. So how do we choose what the right impacts are for a company to focus on? So what I offer up as a really great filter for narrowing down where you want to focus your energy for impact is to really look at what aligns best with what your company's mission and purpose is. So some questions that you could ask for this is, why was our company founded? What's that story? What purpose were you intending to serve in the world by creating this company? What are the things that your customers care about or that your employees care about? What matters to the community that you're a part of? And what solutions are going to support long-term business success? So questions like those can help you get from an overwhelming range of all the things we might do to a couple or a few that are going to like have a really good impact and just feel like a great fit with what your company is all about. So a couple of fun examples. Who Gives a Crap is a toilet paper company that does sustainable toilet paper. So it's all plastic free and recycled or bamboo toilet paper. And they also donate 50% of their profits to help build toilets. So it's like the perfect social impact mission for them because they know they're all about toilets and they just like found the thing that fits with what their business does. Another great example is a solar company in Minnesota that's rooted in an indigenous community, and they hire workers out of the prison industrial complex and help give them job skills and steady employment. So the chance of them returning to prison is much lower. So that's a great way that they can support an issue that's a big problem for that specific community. Our next couple frameworks will look at systems. So basically in between whatever product or experience we might be designing and the impact that we have in the world, there are all kinds of systems that either support negative impacts or positive impacts. So focusing on how we can engage in an ecosystem that's supporting positive impacts instead of negative impacts. And this can be financial systems, cultural systems, the transportation infrastructure, manufacturing systems. All these different kinds of systems are things that are important for us to take a look at and look for opportunities to influence. So the first framework here is just kind of looking along the sort of like business supply chain stream and thinking about what current ecosystems many businesses or product solutions are opting into right now, and thinking about how we might support the growth of clean infrastructure and transition away from some of the harmful infrastructure that exists. So we can look at finance, at sourcing, fabrication, distribution, the use experience, and end of use. And instead of the sort of the dark side, negative impacts, we can opt into systems that are supporting positive impacts. So instead of focusing only on short-term financial gain, working into an ecosystem that's more focused on ESG. Instead of extractive materials that may damage the earth, focusing on regenerative materials, having ethical labor ecosystems, instead of having potential human rights violations, supporting clean transportation infrastructure, supporting maintenance services as a way to extend the life instead of having a short lifespan, and supporting circular economy instead of a linear waste stream. So just a way to generate a lot of ideas about what ecosystems are you tying into and how can you make sure that as you design products that you're opting into the ecosystems that support positive impact. A couple of great examples of this. Unilever has pulled together an alliance with their competitors that helps protect rainforests and has driven a lot of sustainability in the way they source ingredients for their products, especially with palm oil and with their tea. And also Arcadia is a community solar company that has eliminated a lot of barriers for more people having access to solar power. So whether people don't own a home or they don't have a roof that gets enough sunlight or they simply can't afford to get solar panels installed, this company removes a lot of those barriers. And I especially appreciate that they've eliminated the need for a credit score, which for the lowest income people can be one of the biggest barriers for them to have access to clean energy. So they've done some great things in creating infrastructure that helps democratize access to clean energy. So this may be unexpected to some, but I think a very important system to try to change is the cultural system, that we have all the solutions that we need to really address climate, and it's a matter of the collective will to implement those solutions, which means as designers, we should also be thinking about how do we build up a team of collaborators who are as excited as you are and willing to help create all these changes that we need to really move the world forward. So how might we make climate action go viral? So this framework just offers a few ideas about different people that you may be able to influence and different ways that you might be able to influence them. So maybe it's just by creating a future vision that people can get excited about to see what direction we're headed in, or creating a shared purpose based on shared values, like common things we all care about. Maybe it's just expressing a lot of personal passion and get people excited because they see how much you care. I feel like this is one that I've been using a lot. Generating a sense of shared ownership by inviting people to collaborate and co-create solutions, and also just by showing what a great business opportunity there can be in climate solutions. So as part of helping to really foster cultural change and generate more collective will to take action, I really encourage all of you to use your designer superpowers. Designers can do a lot of things that normal people just don't have the skills for. We know how to bring a new experience to life with people who don't know what it's like yet. We know how to tell stories using pictures and other tools. We know how to just imagine a different future when most people tend to envision just a continuation scenario. We're great at fostering collaboration, and we know how to communicate big ideas. So these are all awesome tools that we already have in our toolkits that we can apply to building the cultural change we need and get more people on board and more people part of the team of everyone in the world that we need to help move the world toward positive climate action. Some examples of how this has happened. At Amazon, most people have heard the story of, it was two women. I think both of them were designers, but at least one of them was, who really just started like pulling employees together to get really vocal about climate action. And that's what led to Amazon's climate pledge. A big disclaimer on this story though, those two people did end up getting fired along the way. So certainly choose like what level of vocal and demanding of action you're comfortable with in your role and your position in life. Another great example is Unilever, which just overall as a company have been a huge leader in adopting sustainable practices. And this wasn't just a decision that was made by leadership deciding we are going to be sustainable. It was about a ton of people at the regular employee level being vocal about it and telling leadership that they should do something and being vocal. And it was this momentum of the employees in the company being vocal about it that gave those leaders the confidence to really forge out and be leaders in the industry. And they've pushed a ton of innovation in the sustainability space. So don't assume that leadership needs to be the one driving it. Like where you are right now in exactly the organization you're in today, like that is the perfect place to start leading a big shift towards sustainability in your company. So finally, my last two frameworks are about experience. And I know I'm talking to a field full of designers and creative professionals, so you don't need me to tell you how to create great experiences. Like that's what we do. There are a ton of different kind of lenses that we can use to generate ideas for great experience. So I'll offer a couple frameworks. One is, how might we make new architectures irresistible? So some of the transition toward climate positive solution is going to mean moving from very simple linear systems to like more complex and circular ecosystems that we're going to be asking customers to navigate. So how can we design these systems to make them enticing, make them easy to understand, and get people on board with using them? So moving from disposable packaging to reusable packaging, there are all kinds of interesting new touch points. Reusable packaging needs to be designed very differently. How can we make that an interesting experience? Like, is there a way to see the history of your reusable packaging and like add to that history as it cycles through different hands and temporary owners? Looking at product ownership, if we shift away from that in some instances towards subscription services, instead of owning something permanently, shifting to a different model, how do we make that a great experience? Like you get the thrill of that brand new thing more times than you do with product ownership. How can we like play out that out of the box experience for our customers over and over again? And maybe there's a like into the box experience that we don't normally design for. That's a whole new opportunity to design a great experience. So there's a lot of wealth here of new opportunities of experiences we can create. And then finally, something that the design world has a bit of a bad rap for right now is the idea of planned obsolescence. So as we need products to have a longer lifespan and we need to use materials in a more responsible way where we don't view everything as disposable, how do we design differently so that we can expand the lifespan? So what if there's a system where we design for upgrades? So you kind of get that thrill of like something that feels shiny and new, but most of the components maybe are still being reused. So we could think about a lot of touch points there and new ways to kind of drive a new experience, like the way that Tesla sends digital upgrades. So even though you have the same Tesla, you're getting the latest and greatest UI on your screen and getting new features and capabilities in your vehicle without any material change in the vehicle. I think that's the type of ecosystem that we can begin to emphasize more moving into the future, because we don't want to see a lot of physical products just winding up in landfills. A couple of nice examples of this. The Loop store is an online retailer. We can get like groceries and like toiletry kind of products, and they all come in reusable packages in this reusable tote. My favorite thing about this is you don't have to clean out any of the containers. You just like drop them back in the tote dirty and send it back, and they take care of everything. Another good example is a local company, Armoire, that is doing subscription services for clothing. So shifting the idea of how we consume clothes from buy a lot of stuff and then every 6 months panic and throw everything out of your closet to try to get rid of a bunch. What if that were just built into the system? So you got to have that thrill of new stuff and trying on clothes and wearing a great new outfit. And then it's designed for you to send it back. So you get to have that experience over and over again without ever having to like be overwhelmed by your closet and desperately need to purge. So finally, influencing through experience. This is really about how our designs can influence people, not just through the tangible impacts of like whatever product or service we're offering, but how are we shaping the culture through the experience that we give to our customers. And this is where a lot of digital design really may come into play in partnership with some of the physical designs. So I offer up a framework here for how might we drive climate positive behavior. So if we just wanted to ideate like ways that a solution might influence our customers to be more climate positive in whatever choices that they're making. So there can be very overt or direct ways that are very obvious, or much more subtle or even subliminal ways of influencing people's perceptions. We can appeal to their emotional side or to their rational side. So a few examples, more overt, providing information is probably like the least effective thing we can do, but that's the default that a lot of people kind of jump to. But maybe we could do something more subtle with nudges, or just having a filter so you can select the more eco-friendly option, making options that are eco-friendly more actionable, easier to do. Down here, just reducing barriers. If there's one less step to overcome, you're more likely to follow through on an action. Even just like the way we happen to prioritize options on a website, say, might influence people toward making more sustainable choices. On the emotional side, on the more obvious side, we could do competitive or gamification. The more subtle side, maybe it's just a matter of visual emphasis, or just like psychologically, how do we like reshape the way people think and feel about climate action, or create positive associations with things that people already like. So a couple examples of this in terms of nudges, which is more obvious and rational. Amazon now has a little climate pledge certified badge. If you search for things that happen to have a sustainable certification, this will show up in your search results, which is likely to prompt people to purchase more sustainable options. A more subtle approach, there's this great racing series, Extreme E, which is like a cool off-road racing series, but it's all electric vehicles. So basically they're raising awareness about climate, but also starting to shift the perception, because I don't think climate generally is considered cool. It's more like, oh, that's all the doom and gloom news that I hate reading. So giving people a positive association with climate action is another more subtle way that we can influence people's behavior and experience. So those are my 6 frameworks for how we can use design thinking to magnify impact, shift systems, and fix broken experiences. I hope some of these ideas might be useful to those of you listening today in the work that you're doing. And I also want to mention that I think there's a lot of personal gain to be found in taking action in climate design. It certainly can help you stand out in the work that you're doing. It's a great way to demonstrate leadership. Like, what better way to get promoted than like being the one to forge ahead with your company on climate action. There's so much inspiration to be found in this space. I am constantly inspired by new information and solution examples that I find. And of course, the opportunity to make an impact is just a really satisfying thing to have in your career. So we talked about what's broken with today's experience of being sustainable, the fact that we're asking people to opt out without giving them anything to opt into. We talked about what it looks like when it's done right, with great solutions that are embedded in a service ecosystem and are easy, enticing, affordable, and impactful. We looked at what a new future might be like, where broken experiences are turned into sustainable innovation opportunities. And we talked about those 6 frameworks for how we can focus on impact, system change, and great experiences as designers. So I've just got a few more slides for what I hope all of you joining us today might do next after listening to this talk. So first of all, I hope that many of you are already like way into this climate space and are like doing awesome things that like would totally blow me away, and good for you, like keep that up. And some of you maybe will be inspired to do more in your work after listening to this talk. Either way, I still encourage you to always continue learning as much as you can about this. So for folks who like books, I've picked 3 of my favorite books about climate. For those who love podcasts, I've picked 3 podcasts that have been really impactful for me on the topic, as well as some Instagram accounts. And all of these are great because they're really focused on systems change and focused on solutions, which is where I think our energy and attention needs to be for meaningful solutions in the climate space. I also encourage you to totally steal my ideas and just copy some of the things that I've done by adding sustainability to the way you're doing your design work, maybe starting a green initiative at work, which is another thing I've been doing, joining the climate designers team. It's an amazing community. There are a lot of great people in there. So I certainly encourage you to join in there. I think we'll be dropping some links in the chat. Adopt your own personal career mission. I've loved the focus it's given my career since I've chosen sustainable innovation as my own personal career mission. And I encourage you to become a climate leader. Like, come do a talk just like this one. We need all the leaders and all the people to be on board this movement. There's definitely room for more people. So don't hesitate to jump in and be vocal and start taking this forward. And then the last thought that I'll leave you with is to really be ambitious in the goals you set of how much impact you want to make. But we also remember that we need to do this at a pace that's realistic. So take small steps, but set huge goals. So maybe that starts by starting a conversation even today with someone at work about climate and how you might make an impact there. Maybe make an eco swap or 2 in the office, get yourself some bamboo toilet paper for the workplace. I love having a sustainability brainstorm on projects, things that you think don't have anything to do with sustainability. If you just take an hour and start brainstorming on that, you'll be amazed at how many opportunities there really are. This can lead to design ideas that might impact your product, can lead to an entire initiative, and eventually this is how we'll get to the transformation that we need for the world. So that's it, everybody. Thank you so much. It's been a real thrill to talk about this topic that I care about so much. And I'd love to thank IDSA Women in Design program and climate designers and my colleagues at Indigo Slate on our sustainable experience innovation effort. So that's it. Thanks, everyone.
I give you a one-handed clap. Everybody's clapping, I'm sure. Oh man, wow, Lindsey. I know we have a few minutes left. That was really inspiring, and I know, yeah, I'm sure, like many other people, my wheels are spinning on new projects. There were a couple questions in the chat. Maybe we can try to touch on before we let everybody get back to their work day. Let's see, from Sam Rosenberg. It seems to me that the post-consumer life cycles for recycling and composting are somewhat black boxes, and I'm not always confident that the object I'm discarding is actually getting filtered and processed in the right way. Have you seen any good examples of waste cycles that are more transparent, public, etc.?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'd say mostly I've kind of leaned on like reporting that I've seen where like reporters like go to a waste facility and examine it. And I feel like from that, I have confidence in some parts of the recycling system. But I think it's very safe to assume that like no plastic is getting recycled in any community. Like that's probably a pretty safe bet. But paper, aluminum cans, and glass are still like well worth recycling. For compost, I just feel like that whole ecosystem needs to get bigger and it needs to link in agriculture solutions. So I wish I had a great example of like a community where that's happening in a really transparent way. But I don't have one offhand, but it makes me want to go look for one now.
It does. I want to point out that Kristen also did answer this in the chat and says that she directly reached out to Seattle Utilities, that they're recycling nerds and they're happy to talk more about how and where they recycle. So if you are curious, it sounds like you can go have a good chat with them as well. I love that. Let's see. A lot of the chat comments are mostly just sort of topics, but I think you could still respond to this. So, um, Ilaka said, and I'm sorry for mispronouncing your name, said, thank you so much for your insights, Linsey. My thoughts, systemic change is largely intertwined with a lot of the solutions you're posing. Maybe we need an organization that makes it easier for the layman to understand how to reach out to authorities and demand for what they and the environment around them requires. I do believe policy change is at the crux of moving towards a sustainable future. Linsey, how do you feel like that is woven into what you talked about?
Yeah, I think that's a great comment. And I definitely agree with your sentiments there. I love the idea of having a resource that just like makes it easier to build those relationships and like connect with the organizations and people that you need to connect with to help implement those solutions. And essentially, like when it comes to policy, like absolutely, like no one's like rooting harder for like climate policy than I am. But I think we have to recognize that I see three big bubbles and all of them have a role to play. There's like individuals and we can vote to help influence policy and we can like vote with what businesses we could support. Policy definitely needs to take action, but they're influenced by the individuals and by businesses. And I think that like where designers maybe have the biggest opportunity to impact is shifting the trajectory of businesses. Businesses are so big that they have too much ability to influence policy, but those of us who are in a position of influence within businesses can help shift that. And so I see responsibility in all three of those areas. And I think we need to lean in hard to businesses, at least in our professional work. But certainly if you see opportunities to influence policy, like go hard for that too.
Yeah, I would love to just maybe even have you dive a little further. I loved the example you gave of the, Tesla UI updates. But in this planned obsolescence world where a lot of industrial design are making physical 3D products, what are some other ways you could maybe incentivize a company to stick with 3D products longer instead of, your business or marketing team being like, no, we need to sell a new one of these every year, every 6 months, et cetera?
Yeah, I get that's like it's one of those really like tough conundrums. I think that there are definitely solutions and some of them might involve like shifting your business model. Like I'm thinking of our Sonos folks on the call and thinking of how I'm like, I kind of half want to upgrade my Sonos system, but I don't want to like drop these beautiful speakers I've had for 10 years, like into like, it would be electronics recycling, but still, but like, if there was something like I could pay like $100 to get it to like upgrade inside my Sonos or get the beautiful new case and a few new features, I think kind of opting into a new business model that includes like incremental like upgrade buy-ins, but doesn't require you just like trashing the whole package. But that I know, and that's a big challenge for industrial designers because it means you got to design up front for that in the product in the first place. So it may take some time to transition there. I think though, even simpler solutions can be like, what if it's a subscription model for owning your Sonos where I'm like, I'm just going to pay like, what is it, $15 a month? And I will send back my old Sonos speakers when they're like, hey, it's time for you to swap. Maybe it's like a 10-year cycle or something. But just the simplicity of like, if every company just made a commitment at the end of life that they will take back that old product when you get a new one, or even if you don't, and they will responsibly like learn how to repurpose that. So I think at the very least, designing for material recovery, so that assume your company will take back the product, they will need to be able to take it apart and make good use of the valuable materials that it was made from. I think that could be a really great approach to get us toward that future we need.
Gosh, that's such an awesome answer. Okay, amazing. I want to let everybody go. Anthony, if you don't mind throwing the like climate designers and other links in the chat, that would be awesome, and everybody can go find those. And yeah, as we exit, if you have any more questions, I suppose just find Linsey offline. Thank you guys all so much for being here. It's been super fun, and thank you, Linsey.
Thanks so much. It was a thrill to talk with all of you. And I hope you'll connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to continue the conversation.